Hey everybody, these tape tips were originally recorded for YouTube, so occasionally an episode may have a few moments that are better suited for watching rather than just listening. The link to the YouTube video is in the show notes, and if you're on Spotify, you can choose to watch the video right there. Thanks. Climbing is climbing, right? Indoors, outdoors, sport, bouldering, whatever. The moves to get from hold to hold are essentially the same across the board. No pun intended. So why is it so hard to transition from bouldering to sport climbing or vice versa? Well, in this video, we're going to break down why switching disciplines is not as simple as just endurance versus power or ropes versus pads, and we'll discuss the specifics of how you can transition faster and more effectively. Let's get into it. Now, most of us have experienced some version of this. You're bouldering really well and assume that you can just tie in and climb a hard sport route, especially if it's relatively short. Or you just did your hardest sport climbs and swear that you're climbing V8 after doing a long 512, but can't seem to send any harder than V7 above pads. Well, it's easy to attribute it to just the difference of having a rope on and climbing above bolts, or of every fall being a ground fall, or just the general rustiness that takes a little time to work out. And all of that certainly plays a part, but it's not the whole story. For that, we have to talk about the inherent rate limiters in both bouldering and sport climbing. And rate limiters are constraints that impede us in some way, usually by not giving us as many opportunities to work on something specific. And there are three types of rate limiters: individual, environmental, and task-based. As a community, we already pay a lot of attention to the individual rate limiters, our own personal constraints: height, span, strength, endurance, mindset, and skill. And it's absolutely true that if we look at a dedicated boulderer versus a dedicated sport climber, we often find that the boulderer has more strength and power, while the sport climber has a more robust aerobic system and greater capillarity. But for the person regularly switching between the two disciplines, it's not like they go extreme strength and power and then extreme aerobic. More likely, they live in a middle ground most of the time. Regardless, how to train these individual rate limiters is fairly simple and has been covered a lot already. When we talk about environmental rate limiters, these are the constraints in the field of play, things like temperature and other conditions, the size of the crowd, or how close it is to noise or other distractions. And we have to consider the difference between indoor and outdoor climbing, or the difference between rock types when that comes into play. Particularly since most hard sport routes are on limestone and most good boulders are not on limestone. But it's the task-based rate limiters that are most tricky. Like I said before, the fact that you're climbing above bolts versus climbing above pads does matter, but it's much deeper than that. We have to think about the number of moves and attempts, the amount of rest, and the decisions that we're asked to make. In fact, most of the task-based rate limiters end up misidentified as individual rate limiters, and then we try to strength or endurance train our way past them, which just doesn't really work. Now, for this video, we're going to focus on identifying those task-based rate limiters and then figuring out how we can avoid them so that we can make the transition between disciplines a little easier. Number one, a day of bouldering has fewer overall moves. It's not uncommon in a day of bouldering to do fewer total moves than a single Red River sport route. Months or years of that can dramatically reduce your ability to give several good efforts on a long sport route, no matter how much stronger than the route you are. Sport climbing has fewer hard moves, usually a lot fewer. A few short V6s is very often going to be twice as many hard moves than an entire day spent on 13 minus routes. Being able to go at middle intensity for a long time, like we do when sport climbing, just doesn't help all that much when it comes to really intensive effort. And you're actually rewarded when sport climbing for not giving more than required. And number two, bouldering usually has fewer moves in a row. Beside the fact that there isn't much reason to give extensive effort in this case, it's not easy to stay mentally focused for 100 moves when the most you've had to string together for the past 9 months is 6. Now, sport climbing, because you aren't doing very many hard moves, but you are doing a lot more middle intensity, doesn't give you as many opportunities to cycle between high-intensity effort and full rest. And when you don't practice that, you don't understand the timing of rests and when you're actually ready to try really hard. And your body just doesn't support that cycle as well. Building off of that, number 3, bouldering just doesn't require long strings of decision making. And I'm not just talking about sorting out beta. If something is a little off in move number 3, and you have to adjust on the fly and it taxes you a little extra, you're out of it 3 moves later. You're done. In sport climbing, that mistake at bolt number 2 can affect you and require new decisions all the way to bolt number 10. In that same vein, sport climbing doesn't usually require you to get as deep into the nuance and subtlety. Most people do all the moves on a sport route on their first time up the route, maybe the second. That just isn't the case with boulders. To do harder moves, and then to link several harder moves, you need to make more adjustments more often and try far more times. Finally, number 4, when bouldering, there are fewer reasons to search for stability, whereas when you're sport climbing, you're always looking for extremely stable positions to clip or to chalk. And if you aren't entirely comfortable above bolts, then it's that stability that gives us time to work through that discomfort. And if you're on-sighting, stability gives you more time to make decisions. There's not much stability needed on really hard boulders, whatever hard is for you. On the flip side, sport climbing doesn't reward instability in the same way as bouldering. Getting a move or two further, even if scraping through slightly out of control, can be recovered quickly when bouldering because the boulder ends. Hard moves in general are often characterized by less available control. Most of us aren't doing those types of moves on sport routes. We aren't getting as dynamic or releasing our control as often. We're always looking for stability. Now, these 4 points can, and often do, add up to make it really difficult to switch disciplines, and they're why simply training endurance or strength in the most efficient way won't get the job done. Now, you might be able to get better endurance using blood flow restriction or some hangboard protocol, and you can definitely get stronger and more powerful in the weight room or doing finger lifts, but you're missing the rate limiters. Now, to handle both things, the action capacity side as well as the rate limiters, you're going to have to climb in a specific way. It always comes back to climbing. No matter how much more efficient we try to make training, when you add up all of the factors, it always comes back to climbing being the most efficient way to prepare. So I've got one specific suggestion for each direction of switching disciplines, bouldering to sport and then sport back to bouldering. And I'll tell you about a free tool I've created that'll help both disciplines avoid the trickiest rate limiter. Okay, if you're switching from bouldering to sport climbing, there's one simple session you can add into the mix that's going to make a big difference. And that's low intensity, aerobic, capillarity style volume, something like arcing. Now, my favorite method is to do this on boulders in the gym, just moving steadily from one boulder to the next. But if you don't already have all of the skills of climbing long routes, then you're going to need to be on the wall for a while, linking together lots of moves without stepping off. I don't care if that's bouldering, top roping, auto belay, whatever. You aren't looking for a red-lined pump. It should get to a low medium and then just stay there. If the pump keeps growing, you should drop the difficulty a little. Stay on the wall for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, rest for 10 to 15 minutes, and do it again. 3 to 4 rounds of this once or twice a week. And when done well, this can be a recovery day between harder sessions. For me, that works really well when I'm bouldering. And this one session will take care of not only the aerobic endurance needs for sport climbing, but also the time spent on the wall connecting moves, the longer strings of decision making, and a little of the searching for stability, because stability is often more efficient, and you're going to search for it whether you like it or not. But also recognize that you already have a benefit in that you know how to move through instability, and that's going to go a long way in allowing you to work quickly through the harder moves on future sport climbing projects, and we don't want to lose that. Now, you're likely going to get pumped in a rude way when you get on those sport climbs. But if you have a few spare sessions, try some moderately hard things that make you pumped. Lean into it. If it's a shorter trip you're prepping for, do that ahead of time. In those few sessions, you're likely to sharpen up the power endurance a bit, but also going to be sharpening the skills required to bypass these rate limiters. And if you recognize that you do have a hard time finding that stability, then I've got a video for you all about that. Go watch it next. The link will be in the description. Now, if you're a sport climber who wants to go bouldering and you don't want to just cop out and do the long endurance boulders, it's even more simple. In fact, you should already be doing this. Hard bouldering in your training, at least once a week, probably more. Stop only working on endurance and treat these sessions like a boulder, not like a sport climber going bouldering. And boards, you're the person who's going to get the most out of the boards. Take advantage of them to try really hard boulders over a long term. And I mean actually hard, several sessions just to do the individual moves. This is not only great training for your sport climbing, but it'll also go a long way toward helping you learn to work through the subtleties and nuance of difficult moves, and it'll force you to rest longer between short efforts. But if you're finding it hard to break out of moving slow and controlled like a sport climber, I see that happen with a lot of people, this video might help you learn to embrace the instability. And that'll help your sport climbing too. But for many of you, the hardest part will be learning to give the right type of effort. There's extensive effort, more common in sport climbing, and intensive effort, more common for bouldering. I've got a free 1-hour video series, the Try Harder Toolkit, that explores the science behind giving both extensive and intensive effort, how to tap into them on command, and how to better regulate your effort while on the wall. Like I said, it's entirely free. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching or listening. In the show notes, you'll find related links, videos, and episodes, as well as how you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Current, where we connect the dots to help climbers learn, grow, and excel.